Here we go. It just hit 2 o'clock, but I think it's about a 1-minute delay. I'm Greg Pollack, and I'm here with Evan Yu, the founder of Vue, and we are here actually at Flatiron School in New York City, because Evan, you live not too far away from here.
Yeah, not too far. Well, it took me almost 2 hours to get here, but
depends
on the traffic.
Somewhere in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for joining me. We're going to be monitoring the chat best we can. So if you have any questions, do keep in mind it's like a 1-minute delay to what you're seeing. But I will keep in mind to keep an eye on chat. Meanwhile, Evan's going to walk you through some of the new things that are happening in Vue right now. Oh, do let me know if you can hear us fine. Somebody say your audio sounds great, and that'll make me feel a little bit better. Yeah, so we'll field your questions. We'll go through what's new in Vue. We'll field your questions, and I'm going to be able to show you Evan's screen pretty easily, so we can walk through some stuff.
Cool.
What do you think? What do you want to start with, Evan?
So I'll first talk about probably talk about VuePress a little bit. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. So VuePress. We released VuePress a few weeks ago, I believe. It's been almost a month.
Yeah.
Can't remember. Time flies really fast when you're working on stuff. But anyway, so I originally didn't plan for VuePress to be a project that's like really a full-blown static site generator. It's almost growing into. Originally, I was just looking for a solution to replace some of our existing documentation for like Vue Router, Vuex. We wanted to have a better document generation tool. So we looked at a few different options. Originally, we were using Gitbook, but Gitbook's theming capability is kind of limited. It's also, when we have a lot of translations, the reload time of Gitbook was just getting unacceptable in some cases. And then we thought about writing a custom Hexo theme. Hexo is a Node.js-based static site generator. But again, Hexo's theming system was pretty much string template-based, right? And when I was working, so our current main documentation site for Vue is based on Hexo. And we use a custom theme for that. And during that process, I was like, I'm building a custom theme, but I constantly wish that I could use the Vue syntax. I could write Vue components to do my themes. So I was like, why don't I just build something that allows me to do that? And that's what VuePress is. Right? So at a high level, it's a static site generator. Let me just go into, okay.
Let you guys watch what he's doing.
Okay, let's see. So this is a VuePress repo, but pretty much what VuePress does is we go into docs, and we take a look, and we have the guide. It's a bunch of markdown files, right? So I have a bunch of markdown files, and if I do VuePress build, VuePress dev dot, it doesn't work because I'm inside the VuePress repository itself. So I'll just do a pre-installed npm script that runs the VuePress server. Essentially, it just works. You give VuePress a directory full of markdown files, and it'll just start a dev server. And this is the documentation for VuePress itself, and it's obviously built with VuePress. And the cool thing about VuePress is if we go into, so I'm going to open this with my editor, and well, actually I should open it with VS Code so that you can see bigger sidebars. There you go. So if we go into the docs directory, you'll see everything is just markdown files. That's the whole docs part. But if you go into our default theme, so this is the source code of the default theme that you are seeing here. Right, this whole interface, you're seeing everything is built with Vue components. So if you're building a custom theme for VuePress, you'll be right at home because everything is just Vue components. And all the information. So look at the let's look at this high level layout component. You see that it has some special injected properties, $$page. These contain the meta information about your whole website, about all the pages, and VuePress collects these information during build time and expose to your components. So your components will be able to use that, and you can use the full Vue component syntax to write your themes. And when you run VuePress build, this is the process that we're building our site for production. As you can see, there are two builds going on in parallel, right? One server build and one client build. And the server build actually builds a server-side bundle of the whole website. And then we virtually, so you see these rendering static HTML messages, it's actually running your app as a server-side rendering app and virtually visiting each route. So whenever it's visiting a route, it renders that page into static HTML. So now if we go into, so this project is configured to put the output files in here. So if we go into the VuePress directory, you can see we have an index.html and we have a folder structure that's mirroring your markdown files. So if we go into guide, you'll see it has all the HTML files corresponding to our markdown files. And these are pre-rendered files. If we open one of them, you'll see everything is pre-rendered, static HTML. So it's like super SEO friendly. If a browser visits this page, it directly gets the full HTML. And it doesn't really need to do any server-side rendering, right? Because we pre-rendered everything. So it also has all these preload and prefetch resource hints. So as you can see, right? So what are those, right? We have already these content that's rendered here. So why do we need JavaScript for? So the JavaScript part is actually responsible for doing the same server-side rendering hydration. So once the page is loaded, JavaScript kicks in and Vue actually takes over the page and turns it into an actual Vue app, right? Because if we go back to our source code, you can see here that we have interactivity in here, right? Mm-hmm. So we have a search box where there is a lot of this interactivity, where allowing people to type to search stuff. These interactivity part, they need JavaScript to work, right? But if you're just rendering a static HTML page, it won't come with any of that interactivity. So the interactivity comes from the hydration part.
Right. That's kind of like Nuxt. That's kind of what Nuxt does, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. But so the difference between VuePress versus Nuxt is mostly that VuePress is focused on static content, and the default theme is really just optimized for documentation. Right. Most of the features that we have in there.
It's for documentation.
For documentation, we have a lot of Markdown extensions. So we have a built-in search. And if you go to the Markdown, you see we have a bunch of Markdown options that you can customize how the Markdown rendering engine works. And we have a page about Markdown extensions. We add the anchors. We automatically enhance your links so that they are cross-linked. And when you're building, we actually check for broken links between your pages. So these are outbound links. We support a lot of, we support YAML front matter for you to customize a specific page. GitHub tables, emoji, table of contents, custom warning blocks. These are pretty nice. And very nice code highlighting that works out of the box. So
I had a question in here.
Yes.
Christoph asked, is there a plan to transform VuePress into something like Gatsby on the React side?
Right, so VuePress right now kind of have a bit of what Gatsby does, but Gatsby is larger in scope in the sense that it tries to be a full solution for you to build websites, right? So it takes into consideration of how to consume third-party data sources, APIs, and all that stuff. This is not really part of the scope of VuePress VuePress right now because this was originally just made for the documentation needs of the Vue project. So that's going to continue to be its main priority. However, the architecture of VuePress really is not limited to what it is right now, right? So we are thinking of, if you're interested, you should join our discussion on GitHub because we have an issue talking about how we can expose an API, a plugin API system for VuePress that allows people to extend VuePress to do more interesting things. One of the first steps is, for example, a blogging system that's based on VuePress. That's kind of the low-hanging fruit. Once we figure that out, we believe the ideal, like the 1.0 for VuePress would be the time where we have reached a satisfactory API design for plugins that allows the community to sort of build VuePress plugins that would enable VuePress to do things that Gatsby does. So Gatsby also is based on plugins. So we need something like that to allow the community to extend VuePress, pretty much.
Yeah, and we actually covered on the official Vue news this week on the podcast and the newsletter, Egoist, who has so many different repositories. We plugged 2 different projects of his. One which is called Sabre.js, which is a minimalistic framework for building static websites using Vue.js, and also one called Ream. And so there's other options out there, I think, for people who want to build custom web apps who aren't in need of documentation. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think each of these projects are kind of focusing on a different niche. So if we think about Nux aims to be a higher level application framework, right? So when you build a Nux app, you're still kind of working in the app-centric way of doing things. Your main chunk of code are Vue components. When you're using VuePress, you'll find that unless you're doing a custom theme development, but once you have a theme, when you're actually using VuePress itself, you're just writing markdown files. You don't really want to concern about building a component to do fancy stuff because you want to have all the layout and visual concerns encapsulated in your theme, and then you just focus on content, right? So VuePress, the biggest difference between a VuePress versus Nux is VuePress is content first, and Nux is app first, right?
That's an interesting way to think about it.
And I think Sabre is pretty much app, but a bit more static than Nux because Nux is still Nux covers a bit more because it has the server-side part where it allows you to do logic on the server, right? So Sabre is static generation only, but for apps. And VuePress is static generation only, but mostly for content.
Right.
So each of these kind of differ a little bit differently, but I think the underlying architecture of VuePress is a little different from Gatsby's. So the whole vision of the project don't completely overlap.
Right. Will Vincent asked, does VuePress support markdown files and subdirectories or just all one docs directory? That's an issue I have with our current documentation.
It supports subdirectories. If you look at the source here, VuePress docs. So you can see the README is the default, the root path of our website. So we have content nested in guide, we content nested in config. We also have internationalization built in. So this whole ZH directory contains the same direct structure for the Chinese translation. So to configure that, we actually have first-class internationalization support. So you can specify different locales.
Wow.
And yeah, I can actually show you here. So we can switch between the languages, and it stays on the same page you're looking at.
Wow.
And in case we actually missed this part from early on, so once the JavaScript kicks in and hydrates it, it becomes a single-page application. So when you switch these pages, as you can see, we're not actually reloading. This is a Vue router powered. This is using HTML5 history API to switch between routes, right? And every time you navigate to a new page, the JavaScript corresponding to that page is actually fetched asynchronously as an async component that's rendered on your client, right? And if we go to a page that we haven't visited before, you'll see that little green loading bar on top. That's when it's fetching that content asynchronously. But if we navigate away and then go back, you see there is no loading bar because that content has already been loaded, right? So switching between pages that you've already visited is instant because everything is already downloaded.
Nice.
So that gives you a snappier experience than traditional static pages, even because for a traditional page, you're essentially reloading the whole page and re-executing the JavaScript all over again. And the browser is doing all the new CSS layout and that. But for a site generated by VuePress, once it's loaded, it's actually a single page application.
Nice. So let's see, we've got a few more questions. Lori says, is the readme.md the index always?
Yeah, you can also name it index.md if you want to.
Okay, and then Sun says, how would VuePress hold up for very large news type sites, like 200K articles?
So that probably won't work. This is pretty much a limitation of Webpack because VuePress internally uses Webpack for building the whole thing.
Okay.
So the maximum we can handle is probably several hundred articles. 200,000 is definitely not a right use case for it.
All right, good enough. All right,
Yeah.
What else do you want to show us?
All right, cool. So on top of VuePress, so most of our recent changes are focused in the tooling layer. So a lot of you probably know we have our new CLI coming up. So Vue CLI 3 is currently in beta, and we're really close to RC. So we'll do a quick showcase. CD Vue CLI. So the Vue CLI packages test. So if you've used Vue CLI 2, you know that it pretty much just pulls templates from GitHub. If you create a project with Vue CLI 2, you'll see that the project is created with all the Webpack config right inside the project. So you can tweak it. It makes it easier to tweak those config options, but it also makes it impossible for you to upgrade once you have changed things, right? Or make it very difficult to upgrade because everything is checked into your code. So what we're doing now is Vue CLI 3 takes a bit more integrated approach where things are installed as dependencies. So I'll give an example, right? Vue creates hello world. So in CLI 2, you use Vue init. In CLI 3, you use Vue create. And when you do that, you have a bunch of options. So this debug thing is, because I'm in debug mode, so it has the special preset. You can select the default. So this gives you Babel and ESLint. And that's like the bare minimum for pretty much the simple apps. If you want to manually select features, you see that we have a lot of built-in features. We have Babel, we have TypeScript, and PWA support, router, Vuex, CSS preprocessors. So why don't we select everything and hope it works? So once you select all the features, you'll see a lot more things. So each of these features will have a few additional questions. So with TypeScript, you can use a class-style component syntax. You can chain Babel after TypeScript so that Babel will perform automatic polyfill detection for you. That's via Babel preset env. You can pre-select the preprocessor you want to use. TS-lint. Yes. So you can also use ESLint to lint TypeScript if you want to. We'll just pick the minimum, just dedicate config files. So once you've selected everything, if you're really happy about it, you can opt in to save it as a preset so that you don't have to go through the same thing over again next time.
Nice.
But we'll skip that for now. Oh, okay. So we have something that's not going well. I think I might have messed something up this morning.
This way we get to see how you debug things, which could be just as
Yeah.
educational as
Well, this is
anything else.
actually quite weird. Global, wait. So I think, this is because I was testing a globally installed copy of Vue CLI earlier. Setup dev project. Right. Okay.
What do you want to do?
That's interesting. It's my first time seeing this on a live stream. That is pretty weird, to be honest. So let me just do a fresh yarn link, which hopefully fixes things.
Wow.
And doing live yarn installs is not a good idea. Okay. Let's see. Nope.
You want to come back to this? Do you want to answer some questions?
Yeah, well, this is unfortunate, but we can actually look at something else. So Yam has been working on something for the CLI. So I showcased the programmatic, the command line interface for creating a new project. So we also have a version of the project creation process that looks like this. Okay, so this is, I'm starting a local development server here, but once we actually have this feature ready, you'll be able to just go into a directory and do Vue UI, and that would launch this interface you see here. So we can create a new project, name it hello, and pick your preset. And oh, that already exists, right? So I can force override it.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so we created a project, and it comes with these plugins, and you can also add a plugin. So you can you can get all of these plugins that we currently have, and you can search for them. Say I want to add Vuetify. So we have Vuetify has a plugin for that.
Nice.
People are already building a lot of these. So if you want a PWA, we can have PWA. So I'll do that, install it, and finish. And it shows you, once you install an additional add-on, it runs a generator that kind of may modify your files in your project. So you'll see a diff view. You'll see all the stuff that it has added to your project. And these will be staged for a git commit, and you can just commit that. So add PWA plugin, commit. And now this project is added to, this plugin is added to your project. And you'll see that, so this is the process actually running this interface here. So you'll see all of these normal messages you'd see from the command line as well. And this is actually working locally in your file system, right? So this is done. So you can stop the process here. And
people want to know what you were going to show before you hit the error. Was there anything after that you were going to show off?
well, this pretty much is just like serving the project.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're showing now what you would have run into.
Hopefully it works. I think we created a project here, so let's do that. Okay, this one works. All right. So you have a app created. So notice this app was created completely using our UI, right? The only command line command that we did was Vue UI once it's actually working. But
Nice.
But we did create this project using a fully graphical interface process, and this will actually be saved locally in a local a mini database as well. So later on when you run Vue UI again, you'll be able to go to your project manager. Oh, I'm already disconnected because I stopped the process, but you'll see the projects you created previously on your machine here and go into them.
Can you add plugins at any time?
Yeah.
Interesting. So Now when I want to extend my project, I want to add something, I just can go back into that user interface and add the plugin, whichever it is.
Yeah. Or you can do it from command line as well. So
Right.
it depends on which you prefer. But I think the graphical interface could really help for beginners because some of them may not have the, may not be that comfortable working with command lines, but this gives you a much better sense of what your project actually contains. It's like more intuitive than just looking at your package.json file.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that as I got into Vue, that was something that always seemed daunting. So learning about Webpack and all the things that it's doing under the covers and your packages.
Yeah. So if we look at a project that's generated by...
I don't want to have to ever learn. Do I have to learn Webpack at some point?
Well, we hope that the goal of the new CLI is we want to hide the internals of Webpack to the point where maybe 80% of the users won't have to touch it. There are definitely will be cases where you have to touch it, and in those cases you still need to know about Webpack. But if you've gotten to the point where you feel it's necessary to tweak the internal Webpack config, you probably know what you're doing.
Right.
So in our case, you can see the project structure generated by a default project is pretty minimal. If we ignore node modules, we have source and public, and that's pretty much it. So you'll notice babel.config.js. I kind of want to mention this here because we're using Babel 7. We're using all the bleeding edge stuff, right? We're using Webpack 4, Babel 7, TypeScript 2.8, and Vue Loader 15. One of the things about Babel 7 is it has this new config format called babel.config.js. This is introduced to solve a problem in Babel 6 where if we use Babel RC, which a lot of us probably have seen before, Babel RC is loaded pretty much like ESLint RC. It's like kind of resolved relative to the file position.
Whoa.
So if you are trying to apply Babel loader to a file in your node modules, it'll actually try to locate a Babel RC inside node modules to apply to that file.
Okay.
And in Babel 7, they pretty much made it that they skip Babel RC for files inside node modules by default. So if we want to make sure like anything you included in node modules you want to apply Babel transforms to it, you have to use babel.config.js. So this works more like a project-wide config that will apply to everything that's coming from this project root.
Wow.
So so that's why we default to this always in the latest CLI. And aside from that, you'll see the source directory is all your source code, as you might have seen. This is pretty much standard because we added the, notice we started as a default project, but we added the PWA plugin. And the PWA plugin actually added this service worker registration file for us. And it was imported into your main file as well. So some of the plugins have pretty intelligent generators that like it knows to parse your main.js file and inject this import statement here so that this file works.
Interesting.
Yeah.
If I wanted to write my own plugin, where would I start? How would I learn how to write my own plugin?
Excellent question.
DCLI?
So we still have a lot of work to do for the CLI's for our CLI documentation. Currently, the new CLI documentation is pretty much a work in progress. We have a bunch of topics covered on the GitHub repo. So our plan is we will soon turn this into a VuePress site so that you'll have a better way of looking at it. We'll also do some restructuring, but currently we do have a dedicated page called plugin-dev.md that talks about how to do a CLI3 plugin. So there are a few concepts that you need to know. The creator is the class that's responsible for creating a new project, and the service is the runtime part whenever you do start a dev server, things like that. So I won't delve into too much details here. So if you're interested, go to GitHub, Vue.CR repo inside docs plugin dev MD. It talks about how you can do a plugin, but the simplest form of a plugin is really just one single JavaScript file that exports a function, and the function receives the plugin API plus the options of the current project. So inside here we have exposed, the API exposed a number of methods that you can use. You can tweak the internal Webpack config with chain Webpack and configure Webpack. You can register an additional command so that end user will be able to run Vue.CR service your command. And the thing we talked about, so this is a runtime plugin, right? So this plugin is loaded whenever you do Vue.CI service command. Another type of plugin is called a generator, and the generator is okay. The generator is responsible for modifying the files. So when you add a new plugin into your project, if it has a generator, that generator will be invoked, and the generator can add file, modify files, remove files in an existing project, and in addition, it has an API, which I just mentioned, that allows you to inject additional imports into the main entry file.
Nice.
You can also inject additional properties into the root instance. So if we look at CI service. So if we look at the generator here, this is the router generator. So you can see we are doing API inject imports into our entry file. It's injecting the router import. It's injecting a router option into the root instance. So a lot of these are pretty modular. So you can, so if you are, our hope is the CLI should be powerful enough to cover 80% of normal use cases. If you are just trying to build an app and don't want to mess around with the internal tooling, we want the CLI to be exactly that, right? You just install it, you use it, you don't even need to tweak anything. We hope that can be the case for the majority of people.
Great.
But when you really want to customize things, and we understand that's inevitable, especially say you can do additional customization on top of the CLI so that it's reusable across your organization. So Chris Fritz has his enterprise boilerplate, which is based on the new CLI, which adds a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I've seen that. I went to his tutorial at
Right.
VueConf where he walked through his enterprise boilerplate. So if you search for Chris Fritz enterprise boilerplate, you'll find a starter project that has a bunch of his own best practices in there built in, which is really interesting to take a read.
Yeah, and another thing is you can write your, so first you can write your own plugins, right? So all the plugins can do a lot of things, and you can then collect all these plugins and create your own custom preset, right? In addition to just like walking through the CLI and save the preset, you can manually edit the preset because the preset is just a JSON file. So a preset is just a JSON file that specifies the plugin that are used. So once you create a JSON file, you can just put it up on a GitHub repo, and then you can use it as a remote preset. So you can do Vue create -- preset my organization / my preset, and it'll just fetch that JSON file and create the project according to the preset that you have had.
All right, that's great. I had a few questions. Somebody was mentioning rollup versus Webpack, I guess.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that?
So, so a lot of people think rollup is like simpler, easier to use, right? But in our case, like we are trying to provide a CLI that has to cater to the needs of everyone. And if you compare Webpack and rollup is simply because it has a smaller scope. It's intentionally addressing a smaller scope of problems so that it can be simpler, right? For example, Rollup's module transform system isn't as powerful as Webpack's, so we can write Vue Loader, which is extremely powerful. It gives you this ability to like individually transform each part, and each part is like handled by other Webpack loaders as well. But in Rollup, it's much more difficult to do that because Rollup wasn't. It's just like it doesn't expose these low-level stuff that allows you to do that. So you have to there is a Rollup plugin Vue, but over time we've found that Webpack is pretty much a system that you can customize. It exposes a lot of very, very useful internals, allows you to customize it to tweak to very specific needs. So I would say like Rollup would cover 80% of our use cases. However, that 20% would be a deal breaker for us because we can't say, from Vue's perspective, we can't say because we like Rollup, we'll just leave the other 20% of our users in the water, right? Alternative is we're maintaining Rollup and Webpack-based versions at the same time, and that's just too much maintenance burden.
You have to pick something.
We have to pick something, right?
Someone also asked about your theme. I think you're using Sublime.
Yes. I actually switch between Code and Sublime, but
really?
I use the same theme on both editors.
And what's the theme? Do you know?
It's called Material Theme with a pale moon accent, I think. Let me just see. Theme. Pale Night. Material Theme Pale Night.
All right, cool. So I think I'd like to get to questions pretty soon. Is there any last things you wanted to show us off with Vue? With what you've been working on or what's new?
So we do. I just want to kind of mention that Vue Loader 15 was a pretty good update for tooling authors, right? It may not be that obvious for end Vue users, but it kind of solved a bunch of problems that kind of we've been thinking about over a very long time. Some of the legacy problems in Vue Loader where like you cannot pass options between loaders and it doesn't work well with threading and all kinds of stuff. So Vue Loader 15 kind of solved all of those problems for us. And that was like one of the technical things that I'm pretty proud about, but it's kind of hard to explain why like it's such a thing because like for the end user, it actually doesn't change anything about how they work. So which is good, and I think that's kind of the theme of the thing we're doing in recent months because a lot of the stuff we're trying to do is focused on improving the internals, improving the long-term maintainability without affecting actual usage. So we want our existing users to be able to use the familiar syntax. We want their code to keep working while we improve the parts that they may not need to be directly concerned with. So
yeah, no, I think that's great. I think that whole philosophy of trying to keep things simple is prevalent throughout the whole experience of being a developer in Vue, at least from what I've felt from having these amazing documentations just be really easy to everything you've shown me here, which is really focused on making it easy to get started and keep the projects easy to even add plugins. I did mention, Jason Yu is sad that we didn't mention Parcel.
Right. So Parcel is, again, the position of Parcel is quite interesting because if you think about it, Webpack is a module bundler / build system. Rollup is smaller in scale. It's primarily a module bundler. It doesn't really want to go into a full build system. And Parcel is not just the build system. Parcel is almost the equivalent of the CLI, right? It's just one single thing that allows you to just build an app from start to finish. So in that sense, Parcel has an overlap with Vue CLI. But Parcel also has the problem in that it tries to support everything at once. So that inevitably brings in something that we might not need in Vue CLI. that doesn't necessarily cater to the specific needs of Vue users. So I think that's just different approaches to the same problem, right? Parcel tries to be the thing that is like one size fits all, which I think is a brave goal, but I also think that approach would come with its own problems. For example, trying to please everyone at once is always extremely hard, and it will lead to conflicts and inflexibilities in certain cases. And it can be hard if your system wasn't designed to be configurable in the first place, right? So zero config is great when it fits your needs, but not so great when you actually need to tweak things. So VCI is the thing that kind of we want to be zero config for at least half of our users.
Nice.
But for other users who want to tweak things, we still want to make like customization a first-class concept in the CLI.
Yeah, that's great. Should we start answering some of these questions?
Sure. If
you have questions, feel free to add them in there. We're going to go through them one at a time, starting with the one at the top. So using TypeScript with Vue is still a subpar experience. The main reason is the design of Vue's APIs, which make it very hard for a type system to do its job. Are there any plans to change that?
So yes, we acknowledge that, and I think the TypeScript team has already done a pretty good job of helping us improving our typing. And one of the things that we want to do is keep working with the TypeScript team to improve that. And in fact, Pine Wu, who works on Vader, and he works at Microsoft, and pretty much like we have pretty strong support from Microsoft because they're interested in making sure the TS plus Vue story is a good one. So you can, I think everyone can rest assured that we'll see improvement in that aspect in the future. So regarding the API design, right? So it's true that the current object-based API of Vue was designed without typing in mind, right? We haven't, so the API has stayed that way since, it's pretty much that way since the early days, like 0.x, right? It's an object-based API, and so back when we first started working on Vue, typing in the front-end world really wasn't a thing. So the API wasn't designed with typing in mind. But over time, we are seeing the importance of that, especially in larger projects. So we are thinking about that in the next iteration of design. Currently, we have the decorator-based approach that allows you to write a class-based syntax, but that's not first class, as people have pointed out. So we do want to consider shipping a first-class class-based API, or maybe not class-based, but we definitely want to ship an API that plays nicer with typing systems. But to do that, the challenge is how do we avoid interrupting users that's on the old API? So we have a few options. We can do, say in 3.0, we'll make the breaking change and make the new default API class-based or whatever the new API, type-friendly API it is. And then we provide adapters that turns the old object-based components into the new ones. Or we can continue to use the object-based format as the underlying implementation, but make the current class-based decorator a first-class part and makes it a bit more performant and makes it more smoother to use. So these are the two options. We're definitely considering that. But as you know, changing the API is a very big change. It's a fundamental shift in how the framework works. So we need to be extremely careful about that. So we don't want to haste that. So that's probably going to happen in 3.0, and it'll take some time before we actually do that. But yes, it's on the roadmap.
Nice. At the Vue.js Amsterdam conference, this is a question from Yancey. Evan mentioned the possibility of combining actions and mutations in Vuex. Is that possibility still being considered?
Yes, so that's one of the things that we plan to do. So there is another question that I saw that mentioning, talking about the roadmap. So we've slipped past the roadmap quite a bit because the new CLI is taking much longer than expected, and VuePress also kind of blew up bigger than we thought. So we spent a bit more time on the tooling section. So we spent probably the last few months all on the tooling part. After VueCI CI 3 gets stable, we'll start focusing back on core. Next step is 2.6. We have a bunch of great PRs lined up and a bunch of new features that we want to ship in 2.6. And after 2.6, we'll start looking into Vuex. And this is going to be a major upgrade for Vuex. And as mentioned, we plan to get rid of mutations altogether. The challenge is how do we ensure the same DevTools debugging experience that we currently have. So that involves, so the actual API change in Vuex, the design and implementation is actually not that much work. The bigger chunk of work is finding a good path for existing users to migrate and ensuring we upgrade the dev tool at the same time to make sure it works well with the new version of Vuex. So that's kind of a interlocked pieces of work. So it's kind of bigger in scope than it seems. So we also want to kind of plan it carefully to make sure like when we actually release it, all the tooling and things surrounding it can upgrade smoothly as well. But yes, that'll probably happen later in the year.
Yeah. Nice. All right, next, are there any plans of allowing ES6 classes and annotations as a first-class citizen, alternate to the current Vue object definition, asked by Hector?
So this is kind of related to the TypeScript question that we just answered. And the answer is we have considerations on that. So we cannot say 100% that we'll do it or not, but it's one of the things that we've been thinking about. It takes a bit more discussion to arrive at the good compromise, because primarily the reason Vue never used a class-based API as default was because ES6 classes in their first iteration wasn't sufficient for us to express everything we needed for the component, right? So if you want to, the first draft of the ES6 classes only allowed you to do class member methods and static getters. That's pretty much it. You can't even do static properties directly in the class body. And if you want to do metaprogramming on the class, you need to use decorators, which wasn't even officially part of the language when it first came out, right? So that essentially forced users to use a transpiling step using a proposal that isn't that was stage 2, right? So for us, that seems like it's risky, and also it kind of makes it impossible for new users to try Vue without build step.
Without build.
So that places a great barrier to entry, and barrier to entry is extremely important to Vue. So we want to make sure Vue's default API can always run unmodified in the latest browsers without a build step, and that's one of our design constraints we want to value. So this is why we didn't get on the class-based API train, but things are changing. So the class syntax is going to improve over time. ES is getting more features. One of the more exciting aspects of it is the new decorator proposal. Some of our framework authors actually got involved in the new discussion for the new decorator proposal. So
nice.
The current stage 2 proposal is actually going to change quite a bit. When Yehuda, when they're trying to push the decorator proposal to stage 3, the latest proposal actually makes it quite a bit more powerful and enables a lot of interesting metaprogramming capabilities, and which also would make the current Vue class component decorator implementation much less hacky than it is. So I think when the new decorator proposal reaches stage 3, that would be a really good time for us to reconsider this. Because I think a plain class syntax is still not enough, so we definitely need a decorator. And a more powerful decorator would pretty much solve some of the pain points that we currently have.
The only reason I know what a decorator is because I taught Angular.
Yeah.
All right, next up is Gary asks, I know this gets asked all the time, but it bears repeating. What are Vue's plans for a Vue native official platform? There are solutions out there, but nothing officially supported. Are there perhaps any plans to bring any of the existing solutions into the Vue fold? Are there any recommended platforms?
So for us, the question is interesting because when we consider it official, right? So we have to kind of consider how much work it is to work on a native rendering solution, right? If you look at the teams behind React Native, or Weeks, or NativeScript, you'll see that it's full teams of native platform engineers. In order to build a solution that works equally well on all of those native platforms, you need engineers that are specialized in those platforms, working together, right? So Vue started out as a front-end project. My specialty is mostly in front-end and JavaScript. I wouldn't call myself, a deep expert in iOS or Android. So, even just I probably don't have the bandwidth to actually build a native solution just with one person. I mean, we have a core team, but most of the core team members are also mostly front-end developers. So the team structure pretty much doesn't really give us the proper setup to tackle that kind of thing. And for us, it's also it also makes more sense for us to collaborate with existing solutions rather than building another competing solution with them, right? So our primary goal is to, so if we look at the architecture of these native rendering solutions, all of them are pretty much separated into the iOS native renderer, Android native renderer, a web runtime, and the platform agnostic JavaScript runtime. So Vue's project goal, or our scope, is to making sure we provide a solid platform agnostic rendering layer, the runtime, the Vue core runtime and the virtual DOM layer, that is able to provide a shared runtime so that the other teams, the other companies, like the Weeks team or the NativeScript Vue team, they can use Vue as a building block. They can leverage what Vue provides from the developer experience side, and they do the hard work of making sure everything renders correctly on native devices. And I think that's a good collaboration. That's people putting strength where they're good at. Making a Vue official native rendering, well, it doesn't really maybe it sounds good to have something official, but we believe in this case it's better to collaborate rather than to do it ourselves. And more importantly, we're actually, some of the design goals, say, for example, in Vue 3, is we're trying to make things. I saw another question regarding a native renderer or how you can. Actually, that was one of your questions, right? You see that we have the platforms of Web, Weeks, and all that. So theoretically, you should be able to write custom renderers for arbitrary platforms. Right. And that is true, right? People are already doing that. In fact, both Weeks and NativeScript Vue are doing exactly that. They are using the same Vue source code, adding their own platform-specific code to build the JavaScript runtime for their solutions. Yeah. And there is even a project that uses Vue as the runtime to render to terminal graphical interfaces. Whoa. So, so these are all possible. Unfortunately, we didn't expose them in the first-class API, so that so you have to be pretty familiar with Vue's internals to be able to pull something off like that.
Yeah, and that's part of what my course. So I've got a course on VueMastery.com right now that it goes into advanced components, which leads you down that road. We talk about reactivity. We dive into the Vue source code. We start reading through the source code together and get to that point where we how does the render engine work? How does the mounting process work? Which is what you were talking about. Getting to that point where you realize oh, things are separated out into a web directory. Yeah. Does that mean I could create an Android directory and integrate it? So you can tell that the intent and the way things were laid out was to make it so that you could create additional platforms.
So the current 2.x code base is like 2 years old, right? So over time, we've learned a few lessons, and we believe like in the next big refactoring, we'll be able to actually nicely separate out a custom render API that allows people to easily just create their own Vue renderers, right? So you'll have a renderer that can write to the actual browser DOM, and you can have a renderer that just like spits out text, like a test renderer or something like that. So our goal is to make that pretty a first-class API in Vue. So the higher level API for building applications will remain the same, but the tooling layer will be able to expose more power, allow people to leverage Vue's internals to do more interesting things.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like, I like the idea of the core team and the stuff you're working on to remain true to what you're working on and not get too divided into all these different other open source projects. Like, make it easy for other people to take that on themselves.
Yeah.
That's great. That's what open source is for. Next question is, Brandon asks, when would you recommend a site or project adopt VuePress versus Nuxt? We kind of talked a little bit about this earlier, didn't we?
Right. Yeah, so depending on whether you're focusing on content or you're trying to build an app.
Right, exactly. Content
if you're
first.
having a mix of both, you can consider using VuePress for the content and using Nuxt for the single page application part of your whole thing, right? You can use both.
Nice. Next is, how would you advise I get started contributing to documentation or source code for Vue? If only there was like a day full of that. Vue contributor days. Why don't you call it up on a browser?
Ah, exactly. Yes. That would be the perfect thing. Vue contributor days.
Yeah, I gotta
So we
make
have
sure.
an upcoming event on June 6th. Vue contributor days. Wait, where is the Vue one?
Oh, that's just
This
contributor
old.
days. I thought you were there. There it is.
And Vue contributor days. Yes.
June 6th, yeah. So you sign up, and you've got people giving talks, I believe, at the beginning of the day.
Right.
That's what it
so
sounds like.
we'll do some updates, pretty much like what we did earlier today, but focus a bit more on the tooling aspect of it. So this oriented towards people who are more interested in the ecosystem, in the toolings and repositories, contribution stuff.
Yeah, this would be a good day to get started contributing, because basically you're going to have access to all these people during a good portion of the day.
You'll see there are a lot of prominent developers in the ecosystem attending as well, so you probably will get a chance to ask some questions. We have people from Ionic, Webpack, Quasar Framework, Weeks, Nuxt, Native Script Vue, so Vuetify. So a lot of there will be an open-ended discussion regarding. So a lot of that day's content will be revolving around how Vue can make these developers' life easier. Essentially, these are developers making tools for other developers.
Yeah.
Right. So I am making tools for them. I'm trying to make their lives easier.
Right.
And if I can make their lives easier, they'll build greater stuff that makes everyone's lives easier. And that'll make my life easier too.
Yeah, that's right. All right, I think we're about to enter into the lightning round. This
What
is
is
where we
that?
try to get through all the questions.
Okay.
But you have to
Do
but
it
we're talking
backwards.
about like one
Lightning.
paragraph maximum.
Okay.
All right.
I'll try.
All right. Let's see how far we can get. Could someone from the core team update Vue roadmap? It seems like things have slid back a little, and it'd be great to know the time frame.
Yeah, I talked about this a little bit. We're hoping to wrap up CLI in 2 weeks from now, and then we'll do 2.6. Unfortunately, I can't give an exact deadline because 2.6 is, we still have a bunch of things we are unsure about how long it would take, but I would think that would be within 2 months from now.
Awesome. And are you going to update the Vue roadmap?
Hopefully.
All right. What do you expect Vue to become in the next 5 years? What are your hopes?
So my hope is I want Vue to be a good infrastructure for the web. Like anyone who wants to build stuff for the web, Vue can help them. That's my goal, right? Help people build more good stuff for the web. That's my goal.
Awesome. Vue 2.6 comes with a new ES6 proxy reactivity, but with it, does that mean we can make deep watchers cheaply? But I don't think 2.6 comes with the does that proxy reactivity? I thought that was later.
That's 2.6 next.
Right, that's the next version.
That's not 2.6. 2.6 is not going to come with breaking changes. And to answer that, proxy actually doesn't make deep watching cheaper. It can. No, it does not, unfortunately.
All right, done. Will the keep alive tag be restricted to component, or will it be extended to support the Vue router?
It actually already supports router view, so.
Done. When Webpack template is going to, when is Webpack template is going to support Webpack 4? I've seen the pull request.
Use CLI 3. The Webpack template is only for CLI 2, so CLI 3 comes with Webpack 4. So just use the new thing.
Okay. Can you explain what checking off progressive web app support in Vue CLI provides? When would we want to use this feature?
So PWA, it would take some time to explain what it is, but you should definitely Google it because it's, Google, they're pushing it.
Appreciate that.
So the plugin pretty much adds a bunch of standard files for an app to be considered PWA. In addition, it helps you generate a service worker when you're doing a production build, and then helps you register that service worker. That's pretty much all it does.
Cool. VuePress related. How would VuePress hold up to very large? Oh, we did that one earlier.
Did that one.
Will Vue get something similar to time slicing that is coming to React?
This is part of the things we do plan for 3.0, because in 3.0 we are trying to refactor the internals so that each part of the whole Vue system can be individually packaged up. So we will have a swappable scheduler for updates. We will have a swappable reactivity system, and even a swappable renderer. So most of these things will become, so Vue's internals will become more composable, and that allows us to, say, ship an experimental scheduler that has Fiber-like capabilities. We don't plan to do something that's exactly like Fiber. It's whether it's the size and the gains is still something we're trying to gauge, but the architecture for 3 is definitely going to allow us to experiment with alternative ways of scheduling work, and that's kind of like a first-class design goal in V3.
That sounds cool. Will a keep alive type be restricted?
That's already answered.
For Vue 2.5, the implementation of nexttick was changed to use macro instead of microtasks. This caused various problems in mobile browsers. Will these problems be solved in 2.6?
Yes. We'll revert to microtasks.
Okay. Yeah. I guess, we'll do it. Right now, what's a recommended framework to do mobile apps in Vue.js?
What do you
think might be worth considering?
Worth considering? If you really want to do native, you can do native script Vue or Weeks. If you want to do hybrid, you can do Quasar or try Ionic 4, or you can just do PWA using the Vue CLI. So it really depends on what kind of app you're building. I think each of these have their unique strengths.
Cool. Can you explain what the idea behind Vue.config.js is?
Well, the idea is we want to provide a easier interface, because we want to limit the number of options Vue.config.js, but eventually it has to be there, right? So some of the options exist solely because it's there to save you the trouble of actually changing 5 places in your Webpack config just to do one thing, right? If changing 5 places in your Webpack config and making sure they're correct, then we should abstract it into one single option.
Nice. Vue UI, we can add plugins, but to what extent can we configure them?
Yes, this you should ask Guillaume, but he actually, if you go to our documentation, in addition to plugin dev.md, you have the plugin UI development guide as well. So that's a full guide talking you through how to add a custom panel to the Vue UI to do your own thing.
Nice.
So one thing I didn't show off during the session was we have a Webpack add-on for the UI that gives you a real-time dashboard of your Webpack build. It analyzes your current build cycle, like what module is taking up how much space and all that.
Cool.
Which is pretty cool.
All right. When Vue CLI support the dry run concept we enjoy with Angular CLI, output message describes what we built, each piece of the file set.
This is something we currently don't have on the roadmap, but you're welcome to open an issue and discuss, explain why you think that's a great feature, and we will consider that.
Interesting. How to correctly reset Vuex state?
Oops.
Whoa.
Did it go away?
Where did that question go? Oh, there it is. Came across the initial state and JSON methods.
So you should have a function that returns a fresh object. And every time you call that function, you'll get a fresh piece of state.
All right, cool. Evan, consider adding this at the top of the documentation of Vue. Somebody, what is this?
Oh, God.
This is yeah.
That was us at VueConf US, I believe.
Everybody dancing?
Yeah.
We need to somehow get that. They need to see this. Anyways, we'll move on. How do I convince a corporation, team of 20 people using React, that Vue.js is a better option? I've seen the code they have, and it can be done with Vue as well, but it'd be much easier for the upcoming juniors to understand.
Well, this is a very, it comes up from time to time, and a lot of times it depends on who is actually able to make that technical decision. Are you only talking to technical people, or are you talking to someone who is the project manager who not only look at the technical side, but also at, say, what are their priorities? Do they care about, do they value, say, this thing must have a big company backing? Do they value something like being easy to pick up, right? You need to kind of understand who is the stakeholder, who is the decision maker, and what do they care about when it comes to choosing the framework? What are they afraid of, right? Then you can sort of figure out whether it's possible to convince them. For someone who think that mega corporation backing is a must for technology, then it's really hard to convince them to use something like Vue. But if they don't really care about, say, being a big company, or even they think, oh, independent projects are great, it means we can even potentially sponsor them, to influence them, right? That's a different story. Or in some cases, do you care about how easy it is to hire people or train people? Are you trying to expand the team quickly? It could be hard because it could be hard to hire React experts. They can be expensive, they can be hard to come by, but you can pretty much hire any decent JavaScript developer and train them on the spot, and they can be productive with Vue very fast. So is the ability to be able to quickly ramp up new developers an important aspect in your current project? All of these things kind of comes into play. And you need to analyze the problem, analyze what this decision maker is looking for in order to find the arguments that sort of address their exact needs.
Yeah.
So interestingly, we are thinking of writing a dedicated guide on convincing your boss to use Vue. And we will be welcoming counter arguments from your boss so that we can help you figure out how to address it.
That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Whose idea was that? That's great. How to convince your boss to use Vue. Yeah. I've never seen an open source project even try to, do something like that. I have an app run on Vue Webpack template. What is the best way to make it SEO friendly now after almost finishing the app? Integrating pre-render SPA plugin, Vue server renderer, similar solutions to Nuxt? That's a good question. After it's all built out,
right,
and I need to make it SEO friendly, what's my best path?
I think pre-rendering would be the safest bet, because if you didn't build it with, say, server-side rendering in mind, you probably have a bunch of places or patterns where you like relied on the DOM API, or you use the library that doesn't work in Node.js. All of these can be roadblocks when you're trying to migrate it to server-side rendering, and it can be a lot of pain if it's an afterthought. So, but pre-rendering using, say, something like Phantom.js or Puppeteer, right? Because those are real browsers, so you wouldn't have any compatibility or environment problems. So that can be much safer. The drawback is pre-rendering kind of relies on your content being mostly static. If you have like constantly changing dynamic content, then it could be, pre-rendering wouldn't really do that much.
Right. Your page needs to have like a static state.
Yeah, you kind of have to have a periodic cron job, just like pre-render the page on an interval. That could be, extra work as well. So I guess that's kind of a unique challenge because you already have it built. You can definitely try to migrate it to something like Nuxt. But because Nuxt, I think Nuxt should be, your source code, if it works in the Webpack template, it should be mostly compatible in Nuxt. The only challenge would be whether you have used APIs or called DOM APIs in places where you cannot if you want to do server-side rendering. And for that, it really depends on how you've built it. So I think if that proves to be too difficult, you probably should try pre-rendering.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if we can super lightning round.
Okay.
You ready? Because I don't want anyone to feel like we can get to their questions, so let's just try it. As far as you're concerned, is it better to, ooh, everything jumped. Where can we buy your shirt?
My shirt? Yes. Vue.threadless.com.
Vue.threadless.com. I'll link it. Vue.threadless.com. Cool. Nice. And tell us about that website. Oh, yeah, I should show people that. Yeah. Vue.threadless.com. Check that out. Cool. Oh, I lost my tab. Where did it go? Here we go. Ah. What?
Oh, did it lock up?
No, it's probably fine. Whoa. Hold on. My browser's locked.
Freezing?
Yeah, look at that. Oh, here we got the question still. Oh, I just need to do this. X. There we go.
Is it still live?
Yeah, I think we're good. Is there any possibility to have more documentation how to use build Vue.js, how to really customize the installation with some part, not use Vue Logic Webpack, not template loader? How do you interpret that question?
I'm not sure if I understand.
Yeah. All right, we can just move on. We answered the t-shirt question. Would it be possible for Vue CLI 3 to provide a way to let third-party plugins configure the Webpack dev server config, or a way for the server config to be exposed?
Interesting. Yes, I think so. We have an API called configure dev server, so you can already do that. Yeah.
Cool.
Similar to how you can tweak the Webpack server, Webpack config, you can tweak the dev server config as well.
Right. Is there any possibility to have, that's the one.
Talk about that.
Are there plans to support reactivity for maps and sets in a future version of Vue? And if not, what's preventing it?
Yes, so this will likely happen for 2.6. So, and surely when when we switch to proxies, that's even more of a given.
Nice.
Yeah.
SSR or pre-rendering feels unnatural. Google can render JS. Do you think we'll react to state in the web when these hacks won't be needed anymore?
Well,
I realized that recently.
Yeah.
Like that it's kind of a lie. The whole idea that the Google's SEO bot can't run JavaScript because it can.
It can only run synchronous JavaScript. The trick is if your page loads, then it has to fetch asynchronous data. Google doesn't really know how long it should wait for the data to come back. So pretty much I think the standard way for them to determine the page has finished executing is when there's no activity on the main thread for a given period of time. So if your data comes back after that period of time, they think your page is already idle. And the bigger problem is like they can't really say wait until all pending requests have come back, right? Because there could be more chained requests, or you can have a set interval that's making requests. Right. It can't wait for you forever. So it's not 100% reliable. But like in the end, we obviously hope that Google can figure it out so that we don't have to do all of this anymore. Right?
Yeah. As far as I am concerned, it's better to serve Vue files versus via HTTP servers. But if I have a case when users need to download HTML files with all inline assets inside, what can I do? Actually, the behavior is almost exactly what I need, but here's the problem.
Well, this might be too detailed a question.
Sorry, Alexi. What VS Code extension would you recommend while developing with Vue?
Vetur. That's VETUR.
Yeah.
Or Vetur or Vetur or whatever.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Are we going to get anime titles for Vue press releases, like with Vue?
Yes, we can consider that.
Nice. In Vue Press, is there going to be support for with-base for images without having to create HTML image tag?
Yeah, maybe. You can open an issue and we can see what we can do about it.
Nice. Yeah. Suppose I have a CMS that's publishing content to a database and it's stored in JSON. Could VuePress render that content server-side with hydration? Basically, I make a traditional MVC site with VuePress. So loading data out of a database, I guess, instead of Markdown?
Yeah.
Files?
Currently, we only consume Markdown files from the file system. But as we said, maybe we can extend it to accept alternative data sources. That's all like technically feasible. It's just something we are not doing yet. So it depends on how much demand there is.
Right. Yeah. Sounds like that would be a good
or
feature
you can
for you to
contribute
work
to
on.
it.
Yeah, contribute.
Yeah.
I remember when I got deep into Rails caching, I found something that needed to be fixed, and I submitted an issue, and David Heinemeier Hansen replied, PDI.
PDI.
Please do it.
Please. Wow, that's concise.
Like, I was like, here's an issue, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, PDI, please do it. Like, he just said, like, that's what he would respond to some requests with. Like, please do it. And so I was like, okay, I asked a friend of mine who got in the course, like, let's get together, let's try it. So we did it, we submitted it.
Nice.
And that's how I got one of my 2 core contributor badges, into the Rails source code. The other contribution was actually, you know how Rails would pluralize stuff? And so, it would take, like posts, and it would change it to posts.
All right.
Well, I taught Rails for zombies, and it would take the word zombies, and it would try to make it Z-O-M-B-Y.
Zombie.
Right? And then it would screw everything up. And so that was my other request, was I got zombies into the source code of Rails.
Great contribution.
Yeah, I contributed zombies. What is the current status of Web Components Vue implementation?
Well, so long story short, we believe Web Components is better used as a encapsulation mechanism for shipping components to be used in non-Vue contexts. So Vue CRI 3 comes with that capability. You can build your Vue source files into a web component that can be used on other pages. All you need is for Vue to be globally available on that page.
Yeah, there's a story in this week's official Vue newsletter and podcast where I think it's Anthony Gore published an article on exactly that, being able to wrap your Vue components in web components so that you could use it across other frameworks.
Yeah.
Will there be any native integration packages for use with GraphQL?
Well, Guillaume has been working a lot on Vue Apollo, and anything that's related to GraphQL, just follow him on GitHub or Twitter, and you'll see all the stuff coming out.
And we also covered this week in the news his presentation that he just recently spoke on. I think it was Vue Barcelona. Take a
Yeah.
look at his presentation.
His Twitter handle is Acrium.
Acrium, yeah.
Acrium.
What are the plans for VuePress? Can we wait for a new WordPress?
Well, that's not exactly
That's
what
not-
it's trying to be.
That's
Yeah,
not the
that's
use
totally
case.
different.
No,
Vue
let's stay
Press is-
focused. Given all the effort, will it make easy? Given all the effort to make it easy to add plugins. Oh, gosh, I hate it when that happens. It's like, will there be a Vue plugins config that we can use to set up plugins we want at the start of a project?
That's pretty much the Vue RC file in your home directory.
Right.
You can hand edit that file, create your own presets, and all that.
Yeah. All right. When will 3.0 be out?
That's a hard question, right? Like,
Yeah, right.
not this year.
Not this year.
Not this year.
That's a good answer. I think it was, and again, talking to David Heimeyer Hansen, he was like, never tell people dates.
Exactly.
Never commit.
Exactly.
Because you will always regret.
I'm already regretting the roadmap.
Although there's some people that are watching right now that would like want me to like hurt you until you say when.
Yeah, I mean,
like
like,
when.
The thing we've realized is, I guess it's common for all software engineering, right? Like deadlines never get met.
Oh yeah. Oh god. Yeah.
But
So you shouldn't commit to them.
on a more serious note, the thing is, I personally am the kind of person I want to make sure the thing is good rather than say ship it just so that we can meet a deadline, right?
That's a good answer.
We want to make sure everything we actually ship is solid and is here to stay. We don't want to rush stuff and then get obsolete in 2 months or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't command click class names from the template in SFCs. I mean, the styles are literally in the same file. Why doesn't this work?
I don't know.
Sorry. You can say I don't know. That's okay. Developers, I know as an engineer, I find it so hard to be like, I'm sorry, I don't know the answers to this question. And if we were in like the audience of people, we would say like, does anyone have the answer to this question?
That's a good strategy.
I use it all the time. Are you planning to develop Vue.js content to be used for native mobile apps development?
Well,
we kind of talked about that earlier. Are there plans to fix this issue? We should look like rock, paper, scissors. We don't know. Should we look at the issue?
We have plans to fix all the issues.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, look, it's already closed. Vue component can unimplement an interface. We're not going to take the time to look at it right now.
We'll look at it another day.
Is there a plan to rework Vuex namespace system to have more synergy with ES6 modules?
That's actually a good question as well. So we probably won't do that in 4.0, but we will likely consider it in coordination with Vue 3 when we consider the type-friendly API design for all the libraries in the ecosystem. So hopefully that's when we'll, not just ES6 modules, but also like how the API can play nice with the latest language features and type checking and all that stuff.
I like that answer. I understand the meaning of just collaborate with them instead of create a new one. But is there any possibility of considering a more core solution and proposed to, even if native, they're talking about mobile, but considering a core solution for native script or like a mobile solution?
Like to be honest, the reason we're not doing it is because first, we don't have the bandwidth, and second, I don't have the expertise. Like, I'll tell you that because I'm not an iOS developer, I'm not an Android developer. Maybe I'll be able to build an iOS app, but I'm not the level where I can say I'll build a native rendering engine that can render arbitrary interfaces. So, no.
Yeah. Nuxt 2.0. What? But what?
You should go to Vue Contributor Days and ask Sebastian.
Yeah.
And
ask the Chopin
Alex.
brothers.
Yeah.
Because you don't work on Nuxt.
I don't.
Any plans to add something like JSDoc to automatically create VuePress documentation? Oh, they're talking about like documentation inside the code that generates Vue documentation.
That's actually an interesting idea. We might be able to So that should be doable once we get the plugin API figured out.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is you can extend the Webpack loaders, the Webpack configuration to have a loader extract the JS doc from your JavaScript files and then pass them on to the Markdown renderer. So should be doable once we have plugins.
Cool. Is there a key up event on document element in Vue, or should I create event listeners?
Document element. Well, you have to do that in JavaScript because you don't render the document element with Vue. Yeah.
All right. What are Evan's thoughts about integrating Vue.js with ASP core applications? Is this a recommended approach, or is Vue still best used in Node.js stacks?
Well, I'll be honest, I don't use ASP.NET, so I can't really give you a in-depth answer on that, but as far as I know, there are plenty of community users doing that. But like, the perfect use case is you probably want to have your front end. So I would say, if I were doing it, if you're, it depends. So again, it goes back to what kind of apps you're building. If you're building a single page application, it really shouldn't matter that much on what kind of backend you're using, because your backend should be primarily about the data logic, the business logic, and exposing an API for your front end to consume. If you're thinking about saying, doing multi-page render apps, part of it is like rendered by your backend and part of it is handled by Vue, that's kind of a whole different question. But if you want to make sure the separation is clean, you do a single page application and just let the backend do the API.
Nice. Precisely how can we help you make Vue even bigger than it is right now? Asked by Jules.
I guess, well, I can't really say how precisely you can do that. Otherwise, I would have already asked you to do that. But, but I think any kind of support is really great. A lot of the thing is like go to local meetups or
create your own.
Tell your fellow developers about it if they don't already know about it.
Mm-hmm.
Create your own library. Make other Vue developers' lives easier, make the ecosystem bigger. You can try to learn to contribute to the documentation on the source code or attending the contributor day to learn more about that. And just using Vue to build more awesome stuff for the web, I think that's one of the most direct ways of supporting Vue, because how successful Vue is really not measured by say how big or how many GitHub stars we have. I think it's measured by how many meaningful apps have been built and affecting other people's lives on the web, right? Like, if I can precisely collect the metrics about how many humans on the planet are using apps built by Vue, I think that would be the most meaningful metric for me. Right, like that's like kind of like the work I've done is sort of touching all other people's lives, and I think that's so. If you use Vue and you build an app, you build a great app that helps other people. That's kind of helping Vue because
use it successfully. Come to Vue contributor days. Also, as a teacher personally, I love when I find something that's difficult, when I find something that I run into that I think other problems people are going to have, blogging about it, writing about it. Don't just solve problems here and not spread the word. If you do write a blog post or create a library that you think other people should know about, take the time to do a little bit of self-promotion. Go on to news.vue.js.org and submit it as a story.
Yeah.
That's how you get covered. That's how you get people reading your blog post. That's how you get the word out, is you submit it to us, and Damien and Adam and I will take a look at the stories and get them into the newsletter and get them out.
Sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring. All right. Now for a very serious question, the most serious of them all.
Wow.
Evan, what is your
really
favorite
hard.
anime?
I'll give you a hint. I gave that as the code name of the 1.0 release. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have to go look that up, I guess.
No, I remember that. I just like.
No, I'm saying they
Okay.
have to go.
Yeah,
look
you
that up.
have to go look it up.
I want to know what it is, but I'll have to go look it up. What's your favorite Vue plugin so far? He doesn't play favorites. How don't you know that from?
I don't have favorite plugins. I use them when I need them.
How about, yeah, what's like a useful plugin that you found yourself using a lot?
Using a lot. Plugins that I wrote myself.
Mine. I love mine the most.
I love Vue Router and Vuex.
All right, we got the questions. We host meetups about Vue and Mauritius. Is there anyone we should contact at Vue.js to make it official? There's no such thing as like official.
Actually,
Is there?
So Ben Han is in the chat, right? Talk to Ben Han. Ben Han is doing a website.
Ooh.
Doing a website that centralizes all the Vue meetups around the world to make it easier for people to discover meetups in their
that's
area.
great.
So, yeah, talk to him. I think his Twitter handle is like BangCodeZen.
Something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, like,
Yeah.
look for Ben Han and
Cool.
yeah, I think we retweeted some of it. Things.
Cool. Vue SFCs is what makes coding Vue so nice for me. It's a great developer experience. So coming up with that. So thanks for coming up with that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I have to give the credits where it's due, right? So the Vue SFC format is obviously inspired by a bunch of other like prior arts. For example, I think web components was kind of in very early stages when I got the idea. I was looking at Polymer like 0 point something, and I'm like, so this has to go on the fly in the browser. What if I can do it at compile time? Yeah, this is Ben's Twitter.
Yeah, I'm going to put it in there.
Yeah. And that would be great. And at that time, there was also a Google internal thing. It was like internal proof of concept or just like a deck about an idea of, say, what if we can put things together. That was along the same vein, but when I did Vue, the single file format, it was kind of just like, it clicked. I was using Browserify. I was like, what if I can just like write a Browserify transform that compiles this thing? Then all these ideas that I've seen becomes a reality, because like those were really like kind of just like talking about what if we could do this. But when I was looking into the Browserify transform API, I was like, I can actually do this, right? So I just did it, and then we had the Webpack loader, and then I discovered how insanely complicated but powerful Webpack is. So Vue Loader is actually a pretty crazy piece of software, if you think about it.
Nice. What is the best way to do $watch to multiple data instead of creating a computed property?
Multiple data. You can you can use $watch with a function, right? So inside the function, you can return multiple values as an object, and then you can destruct that object in the callback and do whatever you want with it.
Cool. Evan, what do you think about your creature? Will it rock the world and become one of the most used? Oh, I think she meant creation.
Okay. I hope it will. Well, actually, I mean, for me, it's really like being the most used is not the goal, right? Like the goal is just for those who like it. It's about getting better than what it currently is. It's not about, say, getting better than the others. Right?
It's about helping people, isn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, we have and also like I think I want to take this chance to talk a bit about like the competition between these frameworks. Like there are people who like to use war metaphors for these, and I hate that. Right. Like there was an article like on Medium about like the war between frameworks, and people are like taking weapons with logos on it, and that's just like horrible, right? Like
Yeah.
Like me and say other like framework developers, we don't like treat each other as enemies. We're more like we have the common goal of making web developers' lives easier. And in a sense, the competition is something necessary that forces us to do our best in order to, right? Having the competition helps you see what you're lacking, what you can learn from them, what you can do better than them. And that's sort of, I take competition as something that kind of pushes you to do something better. Instead of, the goal is to do something better. And competition is the fuel for that. Competition is not the end goal, right? So you're not getting better so that you can win the competition. You participate in the competition to get better.
Right. And I feel like if there's any competition here, it's about the developers out there that think it might be a good idea to write their own framework. Like, if you're not using one of these great frameworks like Vue or React or Angular, and you're still fighting this battle where people don't believe there's value there, maybe that's what we're fighting together.
Yeah, I think like it totally. So don't let people like talk you down when you're like, oh, yet another JavaScript framework. Like, it's fine. Like, you can do it. I mean, like, people will. So if you post it onto Hacker News, people will like scold you. People will laugh at you. But it doesn't matter, right? Like, if you're solving someone's problems, it's open source, right? No one's saying like you cannot publish a library that has already been doing a similar thing. Like, I guess the idea is if you're sure you've found something that, a way to do this better than the existing solutions, then you should do it. But do make sure to do your research, right? Like, make sure you've like looked at all the things and make sure the thing you're building is in fact solving something that the existing solution that do not. So you do need to have a reasonable value proposition. But
because there's about a 95% chance that somebody already thought about that problem, and somebody already has a piece of open source out there, and maybe you should contribute to theirs instead of reinventing the wheel.
Contributing is also cool. It's true that because of the saturation of the space, the room for you to actually come up with something that's completely novel is getting smaller. It's becoming more challenging, but also it means if you do come up with something, it's definitely providing some great value so that it can survive.
I think that's a good note to end on today. Sorry if we didn't get to the last few questions, but we did like 50 questions. That was ridiculous. But really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this webcast. I know some of you have been with us from the very beginning. Sorry if you had any issues. I have to thank crowdcast.io, our sort of sponsor for this, as well as I have to mention vuemastery.com, which is where I'm teaching. And I'm also supporting Vue, because basically if you become a Vue Mastery subscriber, 25% of the money that you give us goes back to support the Vue project and all the stuff that Evan and his team are working on. And I know if you go on there right now, we don't have a ton of content yet, but by supporting us, you're supporting all the free stuff that we do, the podcast, the free content, the cheat sheet we create and maintain, and all the paid stuff that we got out there now. And I just produced a new video that just got released today, which really takes the reactivity engine and combines that with the rendering engine to dive under the covers with Vue, so you can really see how it all works.
Cool.
It will blow your mind, I promise. Thanks you guys for watching. Any last words?